Hello everyone, this is Ann Ledgerwood, Pediatric Physical Therapist, and I would like to talk to you today about the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. As a physical therapist who has practiced for about 45 years in Southwest Virginia, I have worked a lot under this federal law, and we're going to talk some about that today so that families and others can understand what the law says and how that impacts the services that can be received. So it's important to understand that this law has been on the books for about 50 years. It's kind of changed form a little bit over time, but it has been about 50 years. It started in 1975 with the passage of Public Law 94-142, which was called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975. That guaranteed the availability of special ed programming for children who had disabilities to help them succeed in the school setting. And it's important to understand that the social climate at that time of the nation is it was a few years after a landmark decision by the Supreme Court that occurred in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. So that was where there was question about the practice of the nation at that time of segregation, which talked about schools being separate but equal. And in the finding of Brown versus Board of Education, it was determined that the schools were not separate but equal. And so that was the end of segregation of our schools based on race. So during that time, there was this feeling and understanding of the need for social equality across the nation for different folks that were not always able to receive the services that they needed. So the law was passed, re-examined in 1986, and it was expanded to include services for the birth to 5 age group, and then it's been revisited and discussed many times, with it becoming known as the IDEA in 1997, which was reauthorized in 2004. So we know that it is still federal law that protects and gives services to children from birth to 21 across America. So as we understand, it's important to kind of understand what that means. It guarantees fairness and appropriateness in decision-making, providing special education to children with handicapping conditions. It establishes clear management and auditing requirements and procedures. And also it assists financially with being able to fund these programs. And it does not exclude children. It is birth to 21. So under that, some of the provisions, there's one thing that is called the zero reject, and that means that children cannot be excluded from special education for any reason. This is to make sure that there's equal access for all children. It's important to understand the least restrictive environment. To the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities are to be educated with their non-disabled peers as possible. And there's also due process for any disagreements that may occur. It's also including in that there is a non-discriminatory evaluation. So that means that there is not one sole test that determines eligibility. We look at the different types of tests and what seems appropriate for a child a way for a child to be tested. And then the other important part is what is called the free and appropriate public education. This is available at no cost to the child and to the child's family. So through the IDEA, you have Part A, which is the general provisions of how it works. Part B, which is the services that are provided through the public school system. And then Part C, which is the birth to age 3 population before children become eligible for school services. So when we talk about this, it's a little complicated, but just to understand that the IDEA is designed to provide services to children and families beginning at birth and continuing through early intervention and then the transition into the public school setting up until a child is 21. So that has to do with Part C, the first early intervention part. It is to follow and see children in the natural environment. Most of the time that's at home for a baby. Sometimes it's in a daycare setting. And it's just important that these services are understood so that families know what options they have. There are some conditions that are automatic qualifiers for children if they're very premature, they have a certain diagnosis early on. But we do testing through early intervention as well to determine if a child needs those services. Then goals are written and then services are put in place to help children and families be able to access the services that they need to be able to succeed. So it's real important that we understand that this begins in the home, but then it transitions to the Part B or school services. And at that point, it becomes related to education. What services are needed to help a child succeed at school? So it's very important to understand the process. In the testing, there are also eligibility requirements, and then there's a plan written with goals that are determined and agreed upon by the family as well. And then the plan is put into place. One important thing, of course, related to me personally and to many of my colleagues is what would be called related services. Now, related services are things like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, other things that really are necessary to help a child to be able to succeed at school. People often say, well, what does that have to do with physical therapy? Well, if a child cannot access different parts of the school building, they can't walk, or they can't walk well enough, or they can't access the playground, or they can't manage in the cafeteria, that's part of what physical therapy does. Also helping with seating. How can a child learn if they can't sit in something that is comfortable and supports them enough? We also work a lot directly with the school staff to be able to know about positioning and different activities and sometimes exercises that will help a child in the school setting. So that's a bit in a nutshell of what is the IDEA. You can refer your child or ask for testing for your child your infant through your local community services board in Virginia, or your pediatrician can help arrange that if you have any question about how to find out about early intervention services for your child from birth to 3. Then at the second part, which is Part B with school services, if your child is in public school and you have questions, if a child needs some testing, you can talk to the Director of Special Education in your county. You can also talk to the school principal or to the child's teacher to find a way to get testing for your child if that is indicated. So there are options sometimes too for children who are homeschooled or in private schools. The public schools can do some things to help children that are homeschooled or in private schools, but it's not quite the same access as if a child was in a public school setting, just for obvious reasons. If a child is in a regular classroom, then it's easier for all these services to be put in place. So anyway, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. This is on our YouTube channel that is to provide information to families and children. So if there's something I can do or a question I can answer, you can reach me at Ann Ledgerwood PT at Gmail. So it's Ann, A-N-N, Ledgerwood, Ledgerwood PT for physical therapist at Gmail. Thanks for listening.